Hello there and welcome to Stitching Tales, a podcast about all things sewing and what it's really like to run a sewing business. I am Johanna Lundström of The Last Stitch.
And I am Malena Hjerpe of Hazelhen Patterns.
And in today's episode is going to be a Malena favorite. This is an episode dedicated to you.
Oh, thank you. It's somewhat sewing related, but it's the step after or the step before as well. It is pressing or ironing or both. So yeah, I do have a... it has a soft place in my heart, or what do you say, soft spot.
You have a soft spot, yes. You're very passionate about pressing, I will say that, and I think long-time listeners are well aware of this fact that this is something that you keep coming back to. So I thought, why not dedicate an entire episode to this? And I cannot think of anyone better to talk to us about this. And I guess first of all, we should start to differentiate between the two words. I will, of course, before say that, I use them interchangeable because I am rubbish at English sometimes. But yes, we have two words here. We have pressing and we have ironing. So what are the differences, would you say?
Asking the English teacher here. No, kidding. English is not my first language, so hopefully you will all agree with me here, but at least you will know what we mean when we say this. Yeah. So
we define it from our perspective.
Exactly. Please correct us if we are wrong.
Yes.
But when I say ironing, I mean like ironing a full garment or a fabric, like back and forth movement of the iron. That's what I picture when I say ironing. Do you have the same?
I have the same idea. I would definitely say that. I would ironing out wrinkles, basically. That's how I feel about ironing. That's what you do.
Yeah, and pressing, then it's more... You don't move around your iron back and forth. You have it more in place, maybe a little bit, but not like back and forth heavily. It's just light or heavy pressed and maybe some steam there, and it's mostly to like press open a seam, press a detail, press the, if you have fusible interlining, press that onto the fabric. That's how I define pressing. So usually, I mean, keeping it simple, I iron the fabric before I start to sew it. I press along as I sew, and I iron the ready-to-wear garment after it has been washed, which I never do actually, but if I would iron a garment after wash, that's when and where I would do it.
Yeah. To me, that's the same definition I would do, and that's what we try to use that. And apologies was because, as I say, sometimes my English is all over the place, so I might say call it iron when we talk about pressing. I'm just apologies in advance. But what we are going to talk about is, of course, what you define as pressing primarily here, right? So why is it so important to press when you're sewing?
It gives that finished look, like if home sewn is, using quotations mark here, if that's like a little bit bad word if you describe a garment, like pressing it will make it more elevated, pristine. It will make it look like you bought it in a good store. That's like the difference. And also from a technical point of view, when you sew over a seam, if it's not pressed open properly, there might actually be a couple of millimeters disappearing because the seam has not been pressed open correctly or like good enough. So it might be some small pleats hidden in there in the overlapping seam then. So it is from a technical point of view also important that you press the seams open, or split to the side, or split to the side if you overlock the seams together. So it is actually really important.
Yeah, it is really important. And I know you mentioned this previously as well, that in the garment industry they also press as you go, which maybe we don't think about that because we feel like it's such fast-paced manufacturing situations. So, but that goes to show, because as you know, time is money, and if you spend time actually pressing things, even in the garment industry, that goes to show how important it is, even though it is not technically a construction step.
Yeah, and it is also going to be so much more easier to press in a certain stage compared to when the garment is fully finished, because you can't reach all the different places than when you have sewn it all together. So it's just easier for you to do it along as you sew, and you don't need to do it. I mean, obviously after every single seam, you can batch sew a little and press several seams at the same time, but you need to press it before you sew over that seam, because again, otherwise it won't be opening up properly. Yeah. Or depending a little bit on your fabric, you can, so to say, finger press it. Works especially well if you have cotton or linen woven fabrics. You can just press it with your fingers open a little bit, like where you're gonna sew. That usually holds it pretty well if you want to do quick and dirty. But definitely press it properly at some point.
Yeah, I agree with you, and so it's such a good to make the this as frictionless possible. Is that I also recommend that you put out your ironing board and your iron and all those things, water, steam, whatever you need, tools, before you start sewing, because that can feel like a hurdle. Then you have this tendency, at least I have, that you start to postponing the pressing because then I have to set up my ironing board, etc., etc. If you don't have it up all the time. So make that a priority, I would say, that everything is prepped and ready to go, because then it will be much easier to go back and forth between the board and your sewing machine, and that will help so much, because it is incredibly difficult to get a good pressing once you have sewn a lot of seams. For instance, when you're sewing pants, for instance, I mean, you can of course access everything, but you just don't get that same type of flat contact that you can get when you're being able to press things on the flat. So and if you have sewn everything together, it's too bulky. Maybe if you want to press something with the waistband, like if you have sewn the loops already, then they are there in the way to create a little bit extra bulk, and it might show through as well. Usually I always press from the inside, but sometimes you need to press from the outside. Then I always use a pressing cloth, because otherwise you will get those shiny marks, pressing marks. You can get those very easily the more layer fabric you have. So that's also why I prefer to press it as long as I sew, so you don't have that same bulk, too many layers of fabric at once. Then, so it's really, I'm getting, just when you said now with putting on the ironing board, I was like, I was in my studio, sewing studio yesterday. I was like, did I unplug the iron? I know I did. I have it as a point now. Like, okay, before I leave, I need to check everything. Also because I'm sharing the space with some other people now. I mean, I want to be respectful and don't leave a mess. So it's like, check before you go that everything. But still, just because you mentioned, I'm like, oh, did I really? No.
I want to run there and just double check it. But I did. I triple checked it.
Advised me, and all the other listeners so if you're watching the video, so what I'm holding up now is one of those timer where you put the cord into, and then you set it for a set number of minutes or hours, and then it turns off. So I actually went out and bought one of those. So after Malena gave some, and that's because unfortunately that was triggered by the fact that I did forget my iron in the sewing studio overnight. Yeah, came back and the studio wasn't on fire, but it was a very suspicious smell. You could definitely feel there was something going on. I will just give a better advice now. Get one that has dials with larger numbers than the one I'm holding now, because I have to put on my glasses every time I set it on. So I don't know why they made the smallest number possible that I can find on a dial. So if buyer beware, if you're getting older or your eyesight is not great, get one with bigger numbers. But yeah, that's a really good tip that hopefully will help us to prevent this from happening in the future.
Yeah, and I have one of those, obviously, since I gave the tip about it, but I don't... in the move, I don't know where it is. I think it is one in my... And I'm using their iron at the moment, so I need to find it just for my inner peace.
Yeah.
But yeah, that feeling is like, did I? I know I did, but did I really?
Yeah, I know, and it's such a. There was some iron that tends to shut down when after a while, so I think that's also better. But which brings me, because when we talk about iron, what would you recommend? Like a regular iron with just steam, or what would you say is a good way of iron to use for pressing?
Yeah, I just have a regular. I have a very old one.
Does it have steam inside?
Yeah, it has.
Water? Yeah.
I think you have to. I think you kind of have to have steam if you press cotton or linen because it's so hot. So you also need a little bit of steam there, and also to be able to get those wrinkle outs, you need to kind of have some steam. Here is a little bit personal preferences. I think I want to manually be able to say like no steam or a lot of steam, so manually decide that, because if you're ironing at a lower temperature, for example with when you have synthetics, then you don't want to steam because then it's just going to be like wet drops on the fabric then, because it's not hot enough to make it a steam.
Yeah, so it doesn't create any steam.
No,
I guess. That's why
exactly.
The reason why.
Yeah, and also the synthetic fibers, they don't steam that well either, so and the steam is not gonna do anything for it. It needs to kind of be natural fibers for it to actually be beneficial. But I mean, you need to try and find what kind of iron you prefer. Some are like putting out a lot of steam when you move it up and down, and you could basically have it a little bit as a steamer. I can find that really annoying that when I place it right next to me, then it comes a lot of steam all of a sudden. So, but it's really personal preferences here, how you prefer. But no, I have just used a very regular iron, nothing special about it.
Yeah.
Do you have the same arm?
Yeah, I have the same. I have two different setups, as I should say, but in the sewing studio. So what I'm holding up now is just a regular iron. It has Teflon at the coating, because I find that's nice. It's easy to clean, so I really like that. If you are careful, and just like you, I like this one has the opportunity to shut the steam off. So what I'm holding now, if you're watching the video version, is it has like a lever where you can have no steam, little steam, or a lot of steam. And also I really like those iron that have two buttons. So one is just for spraying water, and the second one is to get the steam. So I really like that you are able to like really push out the steam when I need to. So that combination is the best for me, and also of course have clear dials with the heat setting and recommendations. But so this is a really good regular iron. It's a Philips. I bought a couple of years ago. I mean, check test results and reviews. I think if you're betting, I do think it's good to have you don't want to have electrocuted by your iron. So it's probably good to get a decent iron at least. But I don't think you have to pay lots of money for it. But I will say at home, where I don't do any pressing, but I do a lot of ironing, then I actually have a steam station from Tefal, which I love because it's so powerful with the steam. So even on linen, it kind of just melts the wrinkles away, which a regular iron doesn't really do. So I'm a big fan of my steam station, but I don't feel I need it in the sewing studio. But then you have a garment
on a hanger, right? And you just steam it like...
No, it's like... No, it's a container. I'm going to post a picture of it over Instagram account. So it's a container of steam. So it looks like an iron, but it's much bigger. And it's extremely powerful. So it's like steam cloud. And then you can put extra steam on top of the steam. And you can hover it over and it's just steam. It's like sometimes there's a fog of steam, steam fog. But that's the next level thing, and you don't have to buy one of those. But I will say it's very, very effective for wrinkly fabrics like linen and such. So that could be a worthwhile investment. And I also actually bought a steamer the other day, but that's for photo shoots, like the handheld steamer. But so I haven't tried that one yet. But so I do have 3, of course. Johanna again.
I'm sorry, is it you that is more into steaming these days compared to me?
Yeah. But then again, I have it. If it has a cord, I can't resist it. So I'm a bit of a gearaholic again. I didn't really realize that before we started the podcast, because I have this idea of myself of being somewhat, cost conscious and frugal, but I'm like apparently not. But yeah.
But all again, those things have a specific, not needs, but purposes. Yeah, exactly.
Purposes.
So it is different things. You don't have 3 of the same thing. You have 3 completely different things that do different tasks. So you get my approval, no problem.
Thank you. Thank you.
Because it does help a lot. And when we're talking about steam, and especially natural fibers, maybe you even want to have those spray bottles. They can just spray with regular water to make the fabric a little bit, do you call it damp? So you do that before, if you want to, iron the fabric before, because sometimes it can be really difficult to get away some creases. So I always do this before I cut out anything. I always iron the fabric because it changes a lot actually if you have fabric that has a little bit of wrinkled creases all over, or if you have a completely ironed fabric. So I always do that before. And you also see if you get away or you can remove those, because I'm so annoyed sometimes when the fabric is shipped or delivered. It is sometimes not always on a roll. It is like folded in half and then on those flat squared cardboard, like rolled up there, but the fabric is folded in half then, and to get away that pressing mark in the middle, it sometimes doesn't go away, and it's so annoying, because then you are like really limited, not just to width, but also you can't really cut anything out in the middle, because you can't remove that fabric fold. So I'm a little bit annoyed by that, to be honest.
Yeah, buyer beware. I agree with you. I've had several instances. And also, sometimes if the fabric has been stored for a long time, it can also get like a decoloring or a little bit bleached. Yeah. So there's actually, even if you get rid of that pressed fold, you can still see shifts and changes in the fabric within that. So you can't use the piece anyway. So yeah. Very good point. Yeah,
and I also have it as a habit that when I do iron the fabric, that just check how it looks, because sometimes there are small color variations or damages to the fabric as well that you maybe didn't notice or the store didn't notice. So just check so you don't get any unpleasant surprise when you actually have cut it out your fabric and there is a stain or fabric hole or anything in the fabric that is going to be visible. That it happens also more often than you think. So be a lookout on this. That's
also another good reason why you should iron out the fabric beforehand, because that gives you the opportunity to detail study the entire big piece, because as you're going over it with your iron, you're going to see all those spots or maybe some yarn that got snatched or something like that or snagged. So yeah, that's another case for why it's so important to ironing the fabric beforehand. So speaking of tools, we have iron boards, and I would say back in the days they were usually made out of like wooden fibers, like pressed fibers, and these days they are usually done with a metal. I guess that's because there's so much steam in modern iron, so it has to release it somewhere. Do you have any preference of the old school ironing board made out of pressed wooden fiber or the metal lightweight ones that you can get today?
Yeah, I'm trying to think what my. I think I have the old one because it's really heavy. So I think it is actually. But then it has, some synthetic padding also on top of it, so it is a little bit softer. I think that works. I think both works fine.
I think both work, but I will say though that because I've tried. I've used both, and now I have one of those because it's really hard to get. If you want to get a new one, it's really hard to find them in pressed fiber. I will say, and I guess that's because wood is a good pressing component. I will say I find that pressing is a little bit better if I'm using those old thick fiber boards rather than the very lightweight, super thin metal ones that you can, at least here in Sweden, are pretty much the standard now. You have to look far to get one made out of wood fibers. So if I would choose, I would definitely go for wood when it comes to pressing. It's just there's something, I guess the surface and everything, I guess you get just a better pressing.
But is it like a metal
it's like a metal
then?
net. So so it's a very thin like metal net made to, of course it's usually padding and of course the cover, but it's super thin metal that is designed to release the steam. And I did because that happened to my old wooden fiber board, because went so crazy because I love steam especially with my steam station. So after a while the fiber started to like disintegrate because I had too much steam. So that's why I ended up buying one of those modern metal ones. But if I didn't have to do that, I would definitely go for wood in my not my very professional, but my personal experience.
No, but I kind of agree there, because also if you have wooden underneath, the steam is not gonna disappear; it's gonna stay there. But if you have the metal net, it's just gonna go through the fabric and disappear in the air. Then it's not going to be as efficient, I would say then. So in the industry they actually have I think I told you this before, but they have these huge ironing tables. Basically there is a suction in the table that the garment also lies more flat towards the table because of the suction, and then they steam it. Maybe not even press it, they just steam it because the suction is going to make the garment lay more flat, and they don't want to have the pressing mark. So in those cases it is a metal netting, but that's because they have the suction as well, and the steam is going to disappear there. But that's more next level professional.
Unfortunately not available. Johanna is putting this on my shopping list.
Does Amazon have it?
Yeah, I need to make more money in my company. I invest in one of those. But yeah, and also when we're talking about iron board, I have also again watched the video version, but what I'm holding up now is this cute little iron board. It's not an iron board for kids, even though it might seem like that. It's actually for sleeves. And this is not just for sleeves, trust me. It's for any area, like a pair of leg pants, or if you have struggling pressing, you need one of those. And if you're watching as you can see if you're watching the video, it's very, I bought it in a second-hand shop and it's disintegrating as you can see, but I love it. I use it all the time when I'm pressing clothes during sewing. So to me, a regular iron board is not enough. I love my sleeve board as a great way of really not having to get those. You can press anything on the round basically, so you don't risk any accidentally causing any creases or folds.
Yeah, I love mine as well. I think I actually have 3 for some reason. I don't know why, but I think all of them have been like a second-hand shop find. So I think I have gotten from my mom and I have myself, and then I don't know where the third one came from. But yeah, no, I love those. When I sew, I actually use that one for 95% of all my pressing, I do it on that little one. You don't need the full big one then. It's just so much easier, as you say, press the seam, press the shoulder. Neckline is a little bit trickier to press than the regular board is better. But the inseam, outside seam on trousers, everything is so much easier to do it on the little board. So that is definitely a favorite of mine. And to circle back to the, if you have one of those wooden pressing board, ironing board, and it starts to become a little bit not so nice looking, just put new fabric on top of it. I've done that on mine, and it works really well. I don't think I even removed the old fabric. I just put new one, something 100% cotton, I think it was, and just stapled it underneath. So that it's very easy to make it new again.
Yeah.
So because it is quite important with having it cleaned, because you can get stain on your garments of fabric otherwise. Maybe not from the pressing board from that fabric, but I don't know how many times it has happened that the iron is giving out some steam and then it's a little bit rust there or something.
Yeah, I wonder about that.
So
I have the
annoying.
same problem. It's so annoying.
Yeah.
And you don't see it until it's too late, so to speak. And then you're like, you can see those drips of brown liquid coming out from one of the openings. I have that on all my irons. And maybe someone listening could help us. Do you need to like decalc, or what's called calcium? Is it something like that? It's probably like a mineral buildup inside. So it's probably I should probably clean my iron. Yeah. So maybe it's just a case of us not taking care of it.
Yeah, and I
do that.
Yeah, and I try to have it as a muscle memory, because here again it depends a little bit on what kind of iron you have. Some when you lift them up, they spit out a lot of steam and then maybe also drips of water, which you don't want maybe, and then you get some colors, watermark stains even on your fabric if it's a delicate fabric. So really need to be careful here, unfortunately. So I try before I actually start pressing or steaming to do some movement with the steam, like press on just on the pressing board, lift up, lift down. So if an accident would happen, it will happen there and not on my garment. I try to always do this as a muscle memory thing, so it becomes a habit. Not really there yet, but I really recommend it because it is so annoying if the iron.
And it's always when you're
it.
doing something like white.
Obviously, of course. Yeah. The iron knows. Annoying.
That's one of the benefits of the older iron, that we didn't have any steam, because then you didn't have that problem because it was just one solid surface that was easy to take care of and clean. But that's a modern problem with those steam irons that I definitely. So I'm gonna make that a promise, and I'm gonna try to do like a proper cleanup on inside. I probably suspect it's a build-up.
I need to do that as well on mine.
One thing I'd also like to talk about is the routine, because you mentioned it, you like to press from the inside. So can we talk a little bit more about that, like the steps, and also, of course, sometimes you're sewing both layers together, and then sometimes you're pressing the seam allowance open. So you say you press from the inside. Why do you start with that?
Just because it's more secure. If something happens, it stains or something, it's on the inside then. But also those shiny pressing marks, really difficult to remove if you got them. So that's why I'm trying to always do it on the inside, because then it won't be visible from the outside. If you have really thick fabric or thin fabric as well, sometimes the seam allowance might even show through, like the outer fabric will become like 3D shaped around the seam allowance if it has like quite thick with the overlock threads and everything. So don't force it, like just gently press it, otherwise it will start to show through. that's an issue, you can place like a third fabric in between your shell fabric and the seam allowance to have it like, so you get like a smoother surface. Pressing cloth or something, it might help. It is a little bit of extra step, I know, but depending on the fabric, how visible it will become. But yeah, I usually always press from the inside, and here you can choose a little bit also if you. Even if I sew with woven, I usually always sew, the straight seam, and then I overlock the seams together. I don't press them open. Again, depends a little bit on the thickness of the fabric, but for me, I think it's more secure. If the straight stitch ever would break, then you have the overlock seam there on the inside to not get a hole in the seam. But if you have really thick fabric, coat fabric or something, then it is more common to press it open and have the seams, not overlock them together. But it depends a little bit. And on knitwear, you always, or if you have an overlocker, you sew the seams straight on the overlocker. You don't sew that straight or zigzag seam. So then you always press it towards the side. And I usually try to, here also, you can think in which direction you want to press the seams. Sometimes it doesn't matter at all. Sometimes it do matter. Just a visual effect. I always try to, on a jersey top, a t-shirt, I try to press the seam towards the back. I don't know why. It's just I want to do it that way. And on the, I'm trying to think now, on the armhole, I press the seam allowance towards the sleeve, just because at the shoulder seam, then you have so many layers of fabric. So if you would press that towards the body, then most of the layers are in the shoulder seam, then you would have to fold them and it will be extra bulky then on that point. That's why I press it towards the sleeve, because then all the fabric layers can be flat. So just think about those kind of things as well, like also on pocket, trousers on the side seam. Usually if you have some pockets in the side seam, you don't want to press those towards the front, because then all the layers have to be folded. And after washing, they probably want to go backwards anyway. They want to become straight again. So just have that as a... which direction do you want to press it? Well, the natural way, basically. Don't force the fabric in. Don't fold it too many times, basically.
Yeah, I do the same thing. And if you look into any ready-to-wear garment, like a t-shirt, or if it's well made and consistently made, the side seams are always pressed towards the back, and it makes sense, because otherwise you risk of having a visual like seam fold or a ridge showing through to the side. So of course it makes more sense to hide it towards the back rather than to the front. And I guess it can make also sense with how the body moves as well, that sometimes the seam slides better towards a certain direction, because depending on your body, it will have a tendency of flipping forwards. And so I do the same with pants, of course, with the side seams, press the seam allowance in the outer seams. But then, for instance, when I'm making jeans, I always press the inseam to the front and top stitch it like that. That's just the standard way of doing it in the garment industry. And I don't know exactly why I tried to figure that out, but I guess, again, it makes sense with the movement, that it's probably nicer for the legs maybe to have it, because you also want to avoid friction and chafing and things like that as well. So those things you have to take in consideration as well when you're pressing seams. Yeah,
and there you usually also have, as you say, you have them stitched down, or you even have the what do you call it? This seam, flat felt seam? No,
flat felt seam. Exactly. Yeah.
So the seam allowance are hidden within the seam, so you usually have another type of seam as well there. So it depends a little, and I try to do this. sometimes I feel a little bit like when I write my sewing instructions, like which direction should you like it's such a like, well, choose whatever we want, but if there's a thought, a reason, I always also write in my sewing instructions like which direction should you fold the seam allowance. I do the same. I don't think I've written. I know that, I mean, symmetry is a big thing, but for example, when you sew the side seam on a t-shirt, you usually sew the side seam and the inside sleeve seam in one go. Then I usually I fold the seam allowance in the armhole in different direction, just to make it less bulky. Because otherwise it's going to be at one point so many layers. So I do usually then just try to fold them in different direction because it's easier for the sewing machine to sew over that. So that's also a little bit to how you can fold them in different direction to make it easier for the overlocker and for the sewing machine.
Yeah, and I have started doing the same. Before I used to do it, as I also do when I'm sewing with jersey, I always press the seam allowance towards the sleeve, sleeve opening, but I've actually done that. And again, if you look into ready-to-wear knitwear, they usually have it the way you're saying, that they are flipped in opposite directions. So, and it doesn't really, it just happens underneath the arm, so it doesn't really affect the fact that you press the seam allowance towards the sleeve. In general, it's just that little tiny thing, and so reducing bulk is such a good idea as well. So you have to try and see what works for you. But I find I love going into ready to wear and see like well made. Sometimes you see cheap made. They have it's all over the place. Sometimes you can definitely, there's no quality control or systemization, because sometimes you can see that one side seam is flipped towards the front and one to the back. That's probably a sign of a badly made garment. But generally speaking, I think you will find a lot of helpful tips with pressing directions when you look inside well-made ready-to-wear, because they have to figure those things out, and they have spent a lot of time doing that, so we can learn from it, I say.
Yeah, absolutely. And pressing is not just for woven fabrics, it is, I think it is even more important for knitted fabrics, for single jersey or any kind of jersey, basically. Because when you sew an elastic material, the seam is usually going to stretch out the fabric a little bit, but with the steam and light pressing, it usually, the fabric like goes back to its original shape. So that's why it's like so important to press knitted fabric, because it's just the seams are gonna look so much better, and especially in the neckline. Whenever I sew a neckline, I usually have like attachment rib, or in rib fabric, or if it's in shell fabric. Usually when I have sewn on the neckband, it does not look nice at all. It is so wobbly. The neckband is not laying flat at all. The seam is very wavy, but with good pressing, it's like magical. It really gets its proper shape then afterwards. So don't be afraid after you sew the neckline. It needs a good press to be able to lay flat. So that is like super important.
Yeah. Very, very good tip. And I should also mention that when you press, sometimes you have to press from the outside, because as we talked about, and I guess a sign if you feel like you want to press from the outside is that despite your best intention and proper technique, you still have that like a ridge, or you can see that, so you don't really see the seam. So that's where I usually flip the garment over, and of course always using a pressing cloth in that's the case, just to get it to lie flat, because I do find sometimes that it is a little bit hard on thicker fabrics, that because you want to me a good pressing is that the seam from the outside is even, so there's not like a couple of millimeters inside and then it's straight and then it's inside, so that's like to me a good sign of a good pressing.
Yeah, so true. And if you're making coats, here depending a little bit on the fabric, but usually the pattern should be constructed that color that you see is usually a little bit wider compared to the undercolor, just so it, how do you say, it rules.
Falls down.
It rådar in Swedish.
The undercolor pulls back the upper color basically, so you don't see the actual seam unless you look up really close and flip the color out.
Yeah, so basically the seam is on the color is not placed exactly at the edge. It's like a few millimeters on the inside, so it doesn't become visible when you wear it. So then obviously you can't either you can't press the seam open and flat exactly at the seam then. So just keep that in mind if you have a collar on a jacket. Sometimes also on a shirt collars, not really as usual there, but still it can be, the top collar can be a couple of millimeters bigger compared to the undercolor. So that's not wrong on the pattern if they are not same sizes. It's the undercolor that should be a little bit smaller. So because when you fold it, when you have it like 3D on your garment, when you wear it, it is a little bit longer for the top color to go over the undercolor. So it's that taken in consideration basically. So so just beware of that if you press colors, that it's okay that the seam is a little bit on the inside.
Especially because and the tell there is that there is 2 separate pattern pieces for the color, the upper and the outer color. Then you know that is what you're trying to achieve. So that's I am a big fan of those. I think it makes a huge difference. Just those tiny little details. It just there's no unsightly seams and I just remember one thing I should say more about pressing direction, which you mentioned, but that you can use it always, try to minimize bulk. And that goes, for instance, for cuffs as well. I'm holding up now one of my top that I've sewn myself. It has cuffs at the wrist, and you can also have waist cuffs, for instance, or cuffs if you're making track pants. Always press. Don't press it down towards the, because you have to again figure out, so you don't want too much bulk. You should try, if it makes sense, try to press it always towards the thinner side of the fabric. I think that's a good rule of thumb in general, because otherwise, as Malena mentioned previously, the fabric, the seam will have a tendency of wanting to go in that direction anyway. So
yeah, absolutely. So work with all the fabric layers. Don't complicate it, basically.
No. And also, the only thing when it comes to the seam allowance at the sleeve opening, for instance, like shirts, more like properly made shirts, they usually have the seam allowance pressed toward the shoulder seam and then top stitch, and I've also seen that on some functional jackets and like that. So there's definitely situations where you could use press the seam allowance towards the shoulder, but you definitely, as Malena says, get more bulk because you add a lot of layers. And with this neckband as well, which you mentioned, always press the seam allowance towards the bodice and not upwards, because then again you get that double layer effect, which you don't want to do. So always minimize bulk. That's like a good rule of thumb with everything. Try to figure that out, because bulk is really the enemy of a good finishing, I think. So that's a good rule of thumb.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and as you mentioned, it's different than if you want to top stitch, and that's on the bodice. Then obviously you want to top stitch down the seam allowance, but then it also stays in place because it's you sewn over it. So that's a little bit different there. But yeah, steaming, it's you can't skip this step, and I mentioned this before and I say it again. I basically steam equally much as I sew time-wise, because it's that important.
Yeah, so it's very, very good, solid advice. And I've actually, this is something that I used to take shortcuts with when it came to my sewing, that I wasn't as diligent about pressing and steaming as I have become. And I will say that my garment does show for it that. So yeah, you cannot like underestimate the effect of, and it's also like getting technique. I mean, not because as we talk about now, you shouldn't like shift your iron back and forth all the time when you're pressing, because it is called pressing, which means that it needs to have a more still motion compared to what we mentioned here with the distinction between ironing. So just figuring out like a good pressing technique for how long you should hold the iron depending on the fabric, and of course also always do a sample and test the settings, because
yes,
I have ruined fabrics. I will say I have ironed wool with the too hot setting and had like this burning hair situation, and when you get those pressing marks, they can never go away because the surface changes. The same, I've also accidentally had too much heat on polyester fabrics as well, and polyester thread, and that has melted or just got really shiny weird surface. So be careful with the settings and definitely check before you start going wild with your iron and pressing.
Yeah, and usually your threads are in polyester and that they can take quite a lot of heat, but cotton and linen fabric, they can take even more heat. So just be careful if you sew a linen garment with polyester threads, which is the common thing. Just remember those are polyester and they can melt if you have too hot of a setting. So yeah, be super careful with that. And one tip also with I love to pre-press things. Pre-press the neckband or pre-press hems before you sew the side seams, because then you can press them flat on the ironing board. You don't have like a finished garment that you need to take in consideration. It's so much easier when the fabric can just be flat, and then you fold and hem, press the hem before you sew those side seam. It just makes it easier, and then I basically just use 2 or 3 pins when I sew the hem. You don't need that much more because the fabric is laying flat already. So don't skip that either. That is so much easier to do a proper hem after you pre-pressed it.
Yeah, easy access. Always make sure that you have the easiest access for everything you're pressing. That also makes sense. And I saw a good tip in a book regarding pressing the hem, because that when you fold it up, that try to just press the fold, because again you will if you have used overlock stitches on the inside, obviously edge finishing of the hem, for instance if you're making pants or something like that, you always run the risk of, as you said, mentioned, getting the pressing marks of the overlock thread, or maybe even the zigzag stitch possibly, but to keep the iron and just have it above the edge finishing or the overcasting, and just smooth out because you only need to press the fold, you don't need to press the seam. So that was like, I saw this tip in the book and I was like, why didn't I think about that earlier? That makes so much sense. I mean, why? And so one of those like tiny things that can also make a big difference.
Yeah, no, so true. So it's like, don't skip pressing, but press with precaution.
Yeah, good way of summing it up. All right. Do we have any more tips to add, or do we covered?
Do you listeners have any tips or tricks you want to add here? Do you have anything you want to share? And we mentioned a little bit with material, but natural fibers usually press so much better compared to synthetic fibers.
With the exception of silk, I would say. Yeah, if you talk like...
Yeah, that's can be very... towards the steam, it can leave marks, watermarks. So, but yeah, it's all fabrics, and I mean, of course, unless swimwear, then it's basically can you even press those fabrics?
I don't know. You don't need, because everything is also stretched out, because everything will lie flat and open, because swimsuit is always smaller than your body, and the fabric is stretched out, which means that the seams will also be stretched out.
Yeah, so I think that's the exception.
Again, you don't have to obsess about wobbly seams or things like that when you're making that kind of tight-fitting garments, because it's going to look a little bit wobbly, and it's going to look great on your body. So
yeah, but for all other garments, don't skip this step.
Yeah, true. Thank you so much for sharing this wisdom, and I hope that you have felt inspired now to give pressing another go if you are one of those that are prone of skimping it. And I'm sure everyone who's listening is of course doing it perfectly already, but if you're not, hope that you found this episode useful, and there's always room for improvement, I think. So thank you so much for listening, and of course if you want to get in touch and watch the video version, you can go over to YouTube where we post the videos. Stitch and Tales Pod is our YouTube channel, and of course if you want to see pictures, we post photos every episode over our Instagram account, so you can actually see examples of what we're talking about. You can do that, and you can also email us at stitchandtalespod@gmail.com. So, thank you so much for listening to us talk almost an hour about pressing. I am Johanna Lundström.
And I am Malena Hjerpe. Bye bye.
Bye bye.